Good afternoon to everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're at. I'm Paul Wax. I'm the Executive Director of ACMT, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar today. Research is very vital to the future of medical toxicology, and ACMT, as well as its foundation, the Medical Toxicology Foundation, is here to support research efforts by our members, including junior members, trainees, folks that are considering a career in medical toxicology. And as part of our program, we have a series of research grants that the Medical Toxicology Foundation funds each year. And the next grant application, I believe, is just opened up recently. Applications are due in March, more details to follow. And we thought of holding this webinar as an informational session about this upcoming round of research grants that the Medical Toxicology Foundation will be funding. So this is meant to answer your questions, to provide you with information, to talk about grant applications. And I'm very delighted and very fortunate to able to introduce our lead speaker today, who's really taken this program over and has done an amazing job leading it and moving it to the next level in terms of its robustness and its ability to, I think, support our members interested in research. So Dr. Stephanie Carrero is an assistant professor of emergency medicine at University of Massachusetts in Worcester. She leads our new Antidote Institute, co-leads our Antidote Institute, which is another program that ACMT has recently developed with Stephanie and Peter Chai from Harvard to foster mentorship and research development among medical toxicologists. And she also oversees our program of research grants that the MTF funds each year. And so she's put together this presentation, and I just want to thank Stephanie again for all the work she's put into this, and she'll be happy to entertain any questions at any point during the webinar. So if you have questions along the way, just raise your hand, and we can get them in turn. We're a small group today, and we'll like to make this as interactive as possible. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Paul. And thanks everyone for coming today or for listening to the webinar if you're listening after the fact. So let's jump right in. The presentation, I'm hoping, will be probably 20-25 minutes. Please feel free to interrupt me at any point, and then I'm happy to take questions afterwards. I want to hear what you guys have questions about in terms of the mechanism. So for the next few minutes, we're going to talk largely about the mechanism itself. We'll review the request for proposals, which is really the details of the who, what, the when, the why, and the how of this grant mechanism. We'll talk a little bit about the review process, which has been overhauled a bit this year to try to provide extra rigor and also provide feedback to applicants, which I think is really valuable. We'll touch a little bit on past awards and where you can find prior awards to get some inspiration about what the foundation has funded historically and what people have been successful with in terms of applications. And then finally, we'll go over some basic pitfalls, pearls, and resources to get you guys started. And so if this is too long and I don't know, didn't read or didn't listen is the right term, but if you don't get through the whole thing, the three things that I'd really want you to take away are here. And the first is that please take 10 minutes and read the request for proposals, which I'll link to at the end of the talk. It's a 7-page document, and it has a lot of details about the instructions for the application, what to include, what not to include, et cetera. And that will really sort of be your springboard to submitting a successful application. Please read the instructions. And then please reach out with any questions. So I'm happy to entertain questions today or any time from now until the due date. And then Karen Ferguson, who's also on the web, who is the Chief Development Officer of ACMT and has been fantastic and collaborative in putting this together, is happy to answer questions as well. And both of our contact information is listed in the RFP. And then finally, remember that grant writing, that research is a team sport and that grant writing is an art. And so for a lot of the applicants to this mechanism, it's often, their first go around at a grant application, or they're early in their career. And they sometimes don't engage the right collaborators or mentors, and it's such a key step in the process. So you're not expected to do this all by yourself. And the right team can make a real difference, make the process easier and more fun, and make your science more successful. So definitely think early about who your mentor is going to be and who your team is going to be, and engage them early in the process. And so the RFP itself looks like this. It's on the web. It's a 7-page document, and it really lists out what MTF is looking to fund and all of the requirements in there. And there are some substantial changes from last year. So we'd like you to review the new version. So the goal is for MTF to fund up to 2 innovative proposals that support their missions, research, education, and practice in toxicology. And historically, the research and teaching and the practice, which have been separate application processes, and this year we've combined all 3 into one. And out of the entire pool of all 3 types of applications, MTF will award up to 2 grants for $20,000 each. And so that's a significant increase from last year, which was $20,000 total was the pool. So we're excited that there's more funds available to fund more great science. And in terms of eligibility, so all ACMT members are eligible to apply. As I alluded to earlier, oftentimes the applicants are residents, fellows, or early career researchers, which is welcome and encouraged. The PI and the mentor must be ACMT members, but the co-investigators do not have to be ACMT mentors. So we encourage interdisciplinary and cross-specialty collaboration. So you don't need, not everyone on the application has to be a ACMT member. If you do fall into that stage of early career researchers, so within 5 years of fellowship, or you're still in training, you'll have to include a mentor in the proposal. And just make sure in the proposal you explain exactly what the role your mentor is going to take, what commitment they've made, and how they're going to help you be successful. That's super important. So they can't just be a name on the paper. They have to explicitly state their commitment in the proposal and sort of make that clear. So in terms of timeline this year, February 1st, we're going to have a letter of intent due. And then March 1st, the entire application will be due. And the deadline is midnight Eastern time on both deadlines. We'll take from March through probably the end of May for the review process. And then the notification of award will go out in June. And the funding period is 1 year, and it will start on July 1st, 2022. And the letter of intent, it's a new feature for the 2022 cycle, and that's really to help us improve the rigor of the review process. So I need to know how many reviewers I need, whether I need certain specialty reviewers, et cetera. And the letter of intent is going to help me gather that about a month before. It's a very short letter, so it does not have to be elaborate. It's intended to be less than a page, and really just sort of identify who the PI and the mentors are, where they're coming from, a working title of the proposal that's descriptive enough to give us a sense of what it's about, and then a very concise description of the proposal. So probably 2 to 3 sentences max. And this needs to be in by February 1st. It's not required, but it's requested, and it again will help us make the review process more rigorous and more effective. And then on March 1st is the rest of the application. And so just remember that there's more to the application than the research proposal. So I think that one of the things that happens, especially again, when folks are earlier, it's their first grant application, is they really hone in on that 6-page research proposal and want to spend a lot of time and effort doing it. And it really is probably the most fun piece to write, and it's maybe arguably one of the most important, but there are lots of other little pieces too. And so sometimes people will forget about those or save them until the very last minute, and it doesn't go well. It tends to make the application look a little bit sort of haphazard. So make sure you pay attention to the other pieces. So they're all listed out in the RFP, and then what each section needs in detail is listed in the RFP as well. But these are what they are. So briefly, there's a one-page info page, which just sort of lists your demographics and where you're from. There's a one-page specific aims page, and this is a feature of all NIH grants, and then a lot of other foundations will use it as well. And the specific aims page is it's your elevator pitch, right? It's a one-page version of why people should be excited about your grant, what you're going to do, and what the payoff is, what the impact of it is. And writing a specific aims page is a skill that develops over time. And this is something that you should spend some time on as well. It also sort of serves as your currency when you're communicating with other potential mentors and collaborators. So the specific aims page is something that you want to put some energy into. And then of course, there's a 6-page research proposal. There's a 1-page personal statement that's required for early stage investigators. And this really helps the reviewer understand where you're at in your career, why you want to pursue research, and how this mechanism is going to support you. So when you're looking at grants like this that are really sort of seed grants that are made to spark a career, these personal statements are important because the foundation wants to support you, right? They want to support people who really want to go in and develop a career in research, apply for larger funding mechanisms, and this is the place to explain sort of how you fit that bill. The letters of support section. So if you're an early career investigator, a 1-page letter of support from your mentor is required, and it has to contain some of the things that I mentioned earlier. So, the mentor's commitment to you, how they're going to help you be successful in this proposal, etc. But you're allowed to put other letters of support in the appendix. They're not required, but I would suggest them. And in general, letters of support for grants should help, again, sort of craft this picture for the reviewer that you have everything you need at your disposal to get this done. So if you have collaborators or co-investigators listed on your application, you can ask them to write a letter of support that will describe their time commitment, their effort commitment, any space or resources they're going to commit to you. If your department chair is particularly supportive, which we hope they are, she or he could write a letter of support that endorses that and talks about the department resources they're willing to commit to help you be successful, etc. So the letters of support really help speak to the likelihood that you're going to be able to complete this wonderful proposal successfully. The bio sketches are sort of an NIH version of a CV, and they are required for the PI, the mentor, and any co-investigators listed on the grant. Your senior, if you're a senior investigator or your senior collaborators will probably have these already available, and they can sort of tweak them for every application. But if you're just starting out and developing your bio sketch, it's a little bit intimidating because the format is very specific, etc. There's a tool that I linked to in the RFP. It's called Science CV, I believe. It's an online tool where you can populate your information in a form, and it will format your bio sketch for you. So it's very powerful, makes it a lot easier of a process than formatting on your own. And these are about 5 pages. So again, if you've never written one, it takes a little bit of time. So you want to do that ahead of time. And it includes, your research, your training, a short personal statement about your, commitment to research and your research goals, program, et cetera, your past contributions to science, publications, and prior funding. The resources and environment page is a 1-page entry. And if you are in a department that does research, there's often, people will have documents like this with some boilerplate language that you can use that talk about your resources and environment. But I would caution you to make sure that what you include in that page covers the information specific to your grant. And again, this is going to be different for everyone. So if you're writing a grant that talks about recruiting patients from the emergency department, for example, your resources and environment should describe the environment in your emergency department, right? How many patients do you see every year? What mechanisms do you have in place to flag research participants, if any? Do you use an electronic tracking board? Like what features do you already have in place that are going to make it easier for this to be successful? And if you're proposing a basic science study, you should write about the lab you're going to use, right? So what equipment do they have available to you? What kind of space do they have available, et cetera? So that environment page, environment is a scoreable criteria, which we'll touch on after. And that page should really help the reviewer be confident that you've got a place to do, a place that's conducive to your proposal. And then finally, the budget justification. So you'll write up your budget, you'll ask for, X amount of dollars, and then the justification is really the why. Why is this project going to cost $20,000, right? What exactly are you going to spend those dollars on, and why do you need them? So those all sort of go into the proposal. And so after you painstakingly put together all of those documents, you submit them on March 1st, hopefully now, but up until 11:59 p.m. Then it sort of enters the no man's land of the review process, which I feel like some people early in the process, and I myself included, in the past, think this is like a black box, but there's actually a lot going on in those months behind. And so we've revised the review process a little bit for a couple reasons. One is to improve the rigor, and the other is to provide concrete feedback to all the applicants. And so, as Paul mentioned upfront, ACMT is incredibly committed to developing junior investigators in our specialty, right, to help make everyone's research better. And whether the proposal is funded or not, I think receiving feedback from experts in the field is really valuable to help people understand sort of what some of the factors are that went into the decision, and where it might be a better fit or where they can revise, et cetera. So we're going to convene an NIH study section for this review process and review it in the same style. So each application is going to receive a detailed review by 2 to 3 clinician scientists with expertise in medical toxicology and research methodology. That'll include scores and written comments. And then it will be receive an overall review from an entire panel of reviewers. And all that feedback will be collated and summarized and available to you after the funding decisions are made, so that you have that available to you. The criteria that the reviewers are going to look for on your application, again, is the same that's used to score NIH applications. And these are the 5 scoreable criteria. So the first is significance, right? Is the project important and should it be done? And this is what you use the background section or significance section of your grant to convey, right? You have to convince them this is an important problem, because even if it's the most well-designed study, if the problem is of little importance, it's not really, it doesn't sort of demonstrate value. The investigators and the team is also a scoreable criteria. And so it's really, does the PI, mentor, and co-IS have the right expertise? Now, with this being a grant that's largely geared toward early investigators, nobody is expecting the PI to be an expert in the subject matter or have published a million papers on the topic. But it's really, especially if you're an early stage investigator, about, do you have the support structure to help you develop this expertise or to get these done? So if your analytic plan, for example, proposes complex statistical methods, do you have someone on your team that's going to help you do that, right? If it's novel analytic techniques, do you have someone that's going to help you do that and interpret them, et cetera? The innovation of the proposal is really the novelty, right? Is something about this new or different? And it doesn't have to be completely new, but something about it. So either the concept is new, no one studied it before, the approach or the methodology is new, no one studied it in this way, or the intervention could be very novel, right? Like this is a new way to treat X disease process, et cetera. But you should make it really clear in your proposal what's novel, like why is this different from what's already out there in the literature. The approach criteria is really to evaluate the methodology, right? So is it scientifically sound? Are the research questions or the hypothesis clearly stated? And is the analytic plan appropriate for those research questions? And then finally, the environment. So I talked a little bit about the environment. a document that you submit, but does the environment have everything needed for successful execution of this? So do you have the lab space and the equipment to do the study? Do you have access to the patient population that you propose to study, et cetera? And this all sort of speaks to the chances that the proposal will be successful and will help develop you. And so each of these criteria is scored on a 1 to 9 scale, with 1 being the best and 9 being the worst. And so a score of 1 means there's almost all strengths and no weaknesses in that particular category. And a score of 9 means all weaknesses and no strengths. And usually that's neither of those are true, right? You fall somewhere in the middle. And as the strength to weakness ratio changes, so does the score. And so those scores you'll see those scores come through. And so one of the places I think is a great place to start when you're applying for a specific award is figure out what's been funded in the past, right? What does that foundation or that funder want to fund, or what kinds of things have been successful? And you can find these on the MTF homepage. And again, I'll link that at the end of this talk. And just know that if you are awarded this grant, that your headshot is going to be featured in webinars in the future in perpetuity as a good example, like all of my colleagues here. But you can see, even if you just go through the titles of these grants, you can see that the spectrum of what's funded is wide. There are some practice and implementation studies, and those were historically under the practice award, right? There are some basic science research studies, there are some translational studies, and some more epidemiologically geared studies. So the scope is really wide, and you can take a look at those on the website that I will link. And another great way to start is if you have proposals available to you, prior successful proposals for a given mechanism, look at them, see how they're written, see how they're formatted, see what people have been successful with. And Peter Chai, a collaborator and good friend of mine, was generous enough to let me link his proposal here. So if you scan the QR code here, this is Peter's 2016 MTF proposal, so you can get a sense of what a successful proposal looks like. Now, the format has changed over the years, so when you're looking to format your proposal for the sections, etc., please go by the RFP that was recently released, as opposed to any prior grants, but this will, again, sort of give you a sense of what they look like. As a side note, I'm working to gather some of the other past proposals if people are willing to submit them and try to make them available. But you can also reach out to people that you know that have successfully done it in the past. It's common practice in the grant world. It's not, as long as you don't, copy people's grants, it's not considered plagiarism or anything, but you really can sort of get a feel for what the format and the content and that sort of thing is. Now, people often ask, what are the biggest pitfalls that we see come through? And once you start reviewing grants, not only on the foundation level, but in the national level, you see some of the same problems come through. And so this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some that I see that kill what otherwise would be really great proposal ideas. So I feel like oftentimes, especially when it's your first grant, if the grant doesn't get funded, people think their idea was bad. And that's often not the case. The idea could have been fine, but there was something about the grant writing or the execution that was problematic, or it could be the institution's priorities too, which is again why I first start with understanding the priorities. But again, this is a short list of some things I've seen kill really great proposals. One is not reading the instructions. And so, the RFP that I've mentioned is out there. It's very clear, or we aim for it to be very clear. And if it's not clear, please inquire. But there are certain things that are allowed and that aren't allowed. For example, in the budget, PI effort is not allowed. I think certain equipment purchases are not allowed. And then there are page limits, right? The research proposal limit is 6 pages. So when people submit a grant that has 8 pages, 9 pages, or submit a grant that has budget items that weren't allowed, for example, it's very distracting to the reviewer, and it also sort of, if there's problems with the quality grant, also makes people question the quality of the science that would come out of it. So it just detracts from your purpose. So please read the instructions and try to follow them carefully so that you sort of get the best review. The reviewer can give you the best score possible. people, I see often not pay attention to all those extra documents I mentioned. So I think folks tend to hone in on that research proposal first. And then sometimes we'll forget about all the other things until the end, which means sometimes they get haphazardly put together. I personally, when I submitted my K award, didn't realize that there was a human subject section due, and I was very fortunate that my mentor caught that. But I had to scramble the day before to write this whole long section that I didn't recognize, and I haven't made that mistake since. So be very careful about knowing what all the requirements are and allotting some time to do that ahead of time. Because it becomes really obvious when they're just sort of thrown together. Institutional approval is going to be institution specific, but on my institution needs 6 weeks lead time to approve. So when you apply for a grant and you get the grant as a PI, the grant's not actually to you, it's to your institution. So your institution has all these processes, or most of them do, have all these processes in place. They have to approve the budget and the effort, et cetera, et cetera. If you go to your grant admin and say, I have this grant due tomorrow, they probably will be pretty upset. Mine would be very upset. And that causes a lot of angst with investigators who haven't done this before. So talk to your grants admin ahead of time, figure out what they need to get this done so that you don't end up scrambling at the last minute or lose the opportunity to apply after you've done all this work writing it, right? Not engaging mentors and collaborators. So I talked earlier about this being a team science. You don't have to do this by yourself, right? You're not expected to do every part of the proposal by yourself. And your mentors and collaborators not only will make the work part easier, or maybe they won't, maybe you'll end up doing most of the work, but they'll come with experience and expertise. They'll critique your ideas through the process, and really overall usually make your proposal much better. So engage collaborators and mentors early, listen to what they have to say, and let them help you make your proposal better. The issue of a research question and the data collection comes up often, again, in proposals that are otherwise really cool. It may not be that the PI didn't have one, it may just be that they didn't make it clear, but if there's not a clear research question, or the data that's collected is not right to answer that question, then what happens in the study is you end up with a whole bunch of data and have to come up with like a post hoc data analysis plan, which is never good science, right? So I see a lot of grants get dinged for that. So just be very clear, and it'll make your life easier if you define that up front, like exactly what question are you trying to answer, or exactly what hypothesis you're trying to test. And then finally, the budget not being justified. So sometimes people will see that the mechanism is for $20,000, and so they'll say, I want $10,000 of RA time and $10,000 of human subject stipends, and that doesn't map to the research proposal they've planned. And again, that funders want to know, like MTF and otherwise, want to know that their money is being appropriately allocated, right? So ask for what you need for the proposal, but make sure that you're very clear. And then again, going back to the first point, be careful not to budget for things that are specifically not allowed, like buying done clinical time or indirect costs. It's all outlined that those are not allowed. And if you have questions, again, ask them, because we can help. And so I always advise that people approach this with a strategy as a process. It's not, when you write grants, it's not like they're due on March 1st. So it's not an assignment that you want to start on February 21st, right? It's a long process, sort of involving collaboration, like lots of moving pieces, and sort of multiple iterations that ultimately, will result in the final piece of work. And so this is an outline of my general approach. There's lots of ways to do it, but just sort of some ideas to get you thinking. I usually start with the RFP for whatever, or the funding announcement, or whatever piece I'm trying to apply for, and read it carefully. I make that a process. I make a checklist of all the things that I would need. I try to understand where my ideas fit into that RFP, if makes sense, and that they do fit there. And then in line with that, the second step, I look at what's been funded through this RFP or through this foundation in the past, right? And then where do I align? Because alignment with your funding agency and your mechanism is super important. And that's sort of another reason that otherwise great grants don't get funded. So make sure you have alignment and you understand the requirements. The next thing I do is I usually write my specific Ames page. And so your Ames page, again, it's an elevator pitch. It's sort of all encompassing without the nitty gritty details, but really what are you trying to do and why, and how is it going to pay off? And that will help you as you move through the process of engaging people. So my next step after that is I start to talk up to mentors, collaborators, my grants administrator, all those people that need to be involved in the process. And you can use your specific Ames page to get them up to speed and help them, understand, do they want to be involved and in what capacity? And they'll give you feedback along the way and you'll revise it and make it better. And then I ask, once I have, sort of my people in place, I ask for all the documents I'm going to need from them. So the letters of recommendation, their bio sketches, because you will inevitably have to remind them again, maybe twice. And you don't want to ask on the day before it's due. It's sort of an unfair thing to ask them, sort of in terms of their respecting their time, et cetera. And it might end up in disaster for you. And then finally, when all those things are, sort of in place, that's when I start really writing the body of the grant, based on all those, all the discussions and based on the revision of the Ames page, et cetera. And then I circulate, revise, and repeat, over through the team until it's done, or more likely until the due date. And then you submit and you celebrate and you wait for that, sort of review process to complete. And so if you think about it that way, you sort of understand why it probably shouldn't be started on February 21st or January 21st before the letter of intent is due. You want to start it early. So right now for this mechanism, you have about 2.5 months, which sounds like a lot of time, but it will go by quick. So just keep that in mind. On the bottom here, the bottom left here, there's a QR code. And if you scan that, that's just a list of compiled resources I put together to get you started. So there are some resources that are MTF specific. So it links to the RFP, to the list of prior recipients, et cetera. There are some resources there that are outside of MTF scope, just things that I tend to give my mentees that are helpful. SAM has some great resources for writing a specific Ames or writing a bio sketch. There are some podcasts and YouTube videos and web pages, depending on how you learn. I also put the code to Peter's grant application in there, the example proposal that I mentioned before, in case anyone missed it. And then finally, my contact information is there. And so it's Karen's, and it's up here as well. And so with that, I'm happy to take questions now, or feel free to reach out to me at any point from now until the applications are due. But yeah, I look forward to reading these applications. I actually have a lot of fun reading them. I love hearing people's ideas. And we want to help you be successful, right? We want to help you put together the best application and have the best chance of funding and really develop your science. So so definitely reach out. I think sort of one of the benefits of ACMT being a smaller organization is that we hopefully people are more accessible, and it's sort of easier to reach out. So feel free.
Okay, I guess we'll call it a day then, Stephanie, unless you have any other concluding remarks.
No, I think that was it. Thanks to everyone who came. And thanks, Paul and Karen and Alex, for hosting. And yeah, I look forward to reading the applications in a couple months.
Yeah, so everyone have a good holidays, and if you're going to apply, we encourage you to start to do your work and soon, so you can get a good application off to the panel. Everyone have a good day then. Thanks again, Stephanie. Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.